Okay, hello boys and girls, welcome to yet another episode of Little Modular. Today we will take a closer look at this beautiful, simple and really effective sequencer by BASTL called KnitWriter, which is equipped with expander right here. As you can see, next to it is a popcorn sequencer, which I have reviewed some time ago. This is a match made in heaven, and both of these modules can give you just unspeakable amounts of fun. But we will focus for now just on a KnitWriter. I'll do a separate video on both of these sequencers working together. Now, before I dig deeper into this sequencer, let me just show you how easy it is to use. It is a trigger sequencer, so it's meant to be fueling your percussive sources and some envelopes or VCAs or whatever, and it has 6 voices. For now, what you need to know is, here are the outputs, A, B, C, D, E, F. I'm using 4 of them and the 5th one as an accent. I have a kick, snare, hi-hats and a rim shot. Let me just show you how fast it is to build a pattern. We're using internal clock. You also can have external clock, which is inputted right in here. But we're just using internal clock. You can see sequencer is circling through all the steps. And I'm just programming some kick. I'm going to add some snare. Then I'm going to add some hi-hats. And maybe a rim. Now I would like to make the rim shot a bit more interesting, so I input some sub-steps, ratcheting style. Now it's a bit square rhythm, so let's say I would like to apply some swing to it. Okay, and now I would like to make some polyrhythms, so I change pattern length for kick. Now I make some other length for snare. Now I change the pattern length for the hi-hats, and I get some really crazy fucked up rhythm, which is a bit messy. So now let's say I'm playing live and I'm a bit stressed about this really bad pattern, so I would like to go back to the 4 on the floor. So I just press function and the last button here, which resets all the steps to 16 steps again, and I'm home. So as you can see, I just constructed some really simple beat really fast, went bonkers with it, and came back to 4 on the floor within just a minute. So you can see how accessible and friendly this sequencer is. So let's just go back and check out all of the functions. As I mentioned before, you have 6 trigger outputs, 6 voices to play with. The whole interface is really easy laid out. You have the main matrix 4x4 buttons right here for programming your steps. You have above here 4 buttons for switching bars, because this sequencer can have from 1 to 64 steps on each of the voices. But each of the steps also has 4 sub-steps, so you can actually have 256 steps for each of the voices. And of course, as you have seen before, each of the voices can have a different length. Here we have 6 buttons for choosing your voices and also muting or unmuting these voices. And here we have 6 buttons for different functions. The most important one being here, function button. If you want to access some other more sophisticated stuff, you mainly do that by using the combination of function and some other buttons. Let's just start with the basics. Okay, let's say I chose the bass and I want to program it. So I'll choose which bar. This is the first bar. I'm inputting the steps here and I press play. Let's just maybe clear the whole pattern. By the way, you clear the pattern with the last row right here. If you press the function, first button right here, you clear only the selected voice. Here you clear all the voices in the pattern. Here you clear all the actives for the voice, and here you clear all the actives for all the voices. We want to clear the whole pattern right here, so it's empty. Okay, so we choose the voice, we choose the kick, and we input our steps. Now that's the first bar, as you can see here. Each of the steps can have 4 sub-steps. You access those by pressing the desired step and choosing different sub-steps with the bar. The bar selection changes its function, okay? So you can, as you can hear, the first step of the kick now is a bit offset, like on the 4th sub-step. Okay, you can have it in different places. You can have some ratcheting like this. Okay, and you can do that with each of the steps. Okay, I can make some crazy ratcheting here and maybe here, offset a bit. Let's clear it again, and let's make this a simple pattern again. Now this voice kick, it's 16 steps long, but let's say I want to make it shorter, so I press the active steps right here, and as you can see, it shows me currently on the matrix which steps of this voice are active. If I want to make it shorter, let's say 8, I would press this right here, but let's make it 6. Okay, so it's a bit odd. If we go out of this mode, you can see the sequencer is stepping only through the 6 voices. Now if I go to snare, you can see it circles through all of the 16 voices, but I can also change it. So I want to make this 12, so again I change the length of this pattern. Now if I input some steps into the snare, you can see it also goes back to the first step after 12. But now let's say I would like to make some crazy hi-hats a bit longer than 16. Then I would again choose hi-hat voice. I go to the active steps, but now instead of 16 I go to the second page, to the second bar, and I'll activate another 16 steps. So now my hi-hat pattern will be 32 steps long. So if I go out of this mode and I can program some hi-hats here, okay, first bar, and then we go to the second bar and edit second bar. And I have done some crazy pattern, and as previously, if I want to go back to the default 16 steps for all the voices, I would press function and this one. If I want to go back to default 16 steps on just that voice, I would press function and this right here. Okay, so now my hi-hat is 16 steps long again. If we go back to the first bar, you can see hi-hat goes back after 16 steps. So this is really neat function. Now I can, for example, hold the jump and improvise a bit with each of the steps, have some fun. Okay. Now I can also mute some of the voices. I do that with this button right here. This is a mute and pattern. With that you can mute voices and change patterns. If I hold it and press some of the voices, I can deactivate them. Also, when I hold it, the matrix changes to a pattern bank. So as you can see, when I switch to the second pattern, there is nothing playing, simply because I haven't programmed anything in the second pattern. Now it's a good time to show you how to copy stuff here. And this is a really neat function, because when you press copy, which you do by pressing function and pressing this button right here, the sequencer sort of copies all the parameters. But when you paste it, you can paste all of them, or you can paste just some of them. Let's say, for example, I would like to paste the pattern from kick to the snare. I choose kick, I press copy, then I'll go to snare and I paste just this voice So you can hear now the snare plays exactly the same thing. Now let's say I would like to copy the whole pattern. So I press copy again. I switch the pattern, which is silent right now, to number 2. And now when I press and paste the whole thing, which is right here, it just copied the pattern to the second slot. So I can, for example, switch to this one and make some crazy changes to all of the voices. Okay. And I could just switch between them, like so. Now it's also a good time to show you the latching function, which is introduced in the newest firmware, which is 1.5, and I strongly encourage you to update to 1.5 if you haven't done so yet. Unfortunately, it's done by a chip replacement, which is fairly simple. You can do it in 5 minutes, or you can do it with computer, but it requires quite a skill to do it. So unless you're an IT guy or girl, just do it with the chip. It's easy. 1.5 gives you latching of the pattern and mute button, because this is momentary. You have to hold it if you want to change a pattern or mute one of the voices. If you want to latch it, you press function and pattern mute button. And right now, when I press this, you can see it's lit, so I can just mute, unmute it without holding the button. And I can also switch the patterns the same way. I don't have to worry about holding this, which can be easy while playing live. What else is introduced in this update? They have introduced different trigger lengths, because normally it's a 1 millisecond trigger. Now with the combination of function and active and this row right here, you can change the length of the trigger from, I believe it's 1, 5, 10 and 20 milliseconds. And you can also have a variable trigger out. So with the next row, this one right here, you can introduce some variation, which could be really cool and make the whole pattern more organic, because you will have varying lengths of the trigger, making each of the hits a bit different. With the same combination of keys, you introduce a different degree of swing, from the least amount of swing with the first button right here to the maximum right here, and that is how it sounds. Okay, that's the least amount of swing, and that's the most amount of swing, as you can hear it. Let's just leave it at that because it just sounds cool. If you want to hear the gate length thing, I have fifth output connected to the accent of my kick drum. So let's just clear the whole pattern. It's gonna be easier for you to hear it. And again, we have 4 on the floor with a bit of the swing, or actually we have a shorter length, so let's make it default 16 steps. Okay, again, if I switch to the 5th voice where my accent is located, you can hear that on each of the second beat there is an accent. Now if I make it longer, as I just showed you before, if I press function active steps, and you can hear it's longer or shorter. See? It's louder, but not as long. And if I make the trigger longest, it's just more prominent. Or I can just make it varying between those 4 values. Can you hear it? It's different each time it hits. So this is really useful for making your beats more organic. You can also have external clock in here. So for example, if I want to make this slave, I would use the combination of function and this button right here, slave or master. Now you can see when I press start, nothing happens because the sequencer is waiting for external clock. So we will give it to him. right there is my external clock, and when I press start and press the external clock, it should run, and it does. Now let's say this is too slow. If you press function and one of those right here, you can hear it divides the incoming clock. Also, this is very useful, the expander for NetWriter. First of all, the output right here outputs a trigger each time a step goes on NetWriter. Below here you have a reset jack, which serves two functions depending on whether NetWriter is in the master or slave mode. When it's in the master mode, each time you press start, this outputs a trigger. So this could serve as a trigger, as a start trigger for all the other sequencers. When it's in the slave mode, this acts as a reset in. So each time it receives a trigger in here, it goes to the first step on the sequencer. Below here we have a simple mold with the upper output right here being inverted. Really nice companion to NetWriter, and I strongly encourage you to also invest in that. Okay, so for unknown reason, I haven't told you about two important things. First of them being live recording, and you do that by pressing the record button right here. So for example, if I want to improvise with some hi-hats, I will just play record and but let's say this is clunky. It is clunky. So I want to clear the hi-hat and record it again, but with a different quantization. So let's clear this right here. You choose quantization by pressing function and one of the bar buttons. The first one being the least quantization applied while recording, and the last one being the most quantized. When you press this one, it quantizes the recorded steps to the nearest sub step. Then it quantizes to the second nearest sub step. Then it quantizes to the first sub step, and then to the second full step. So let's try the maximum quantization right now. Let's record it again. So now it sounds better compared to what I have just inputted. The second option I wanted to show you is the use of tap tempo and nudging tempo up and down. So we can tap it by holding function and tap. So it's faster or slower. Or you can nudge it up or down with those two buttons and function. If you're looking for a drum sequencer, currently I can't think of any better options. Maybe this will change because I'm waiting for Eloquencer, which is on its way. But for now, in my book, there is nothing that could rival NetWriter as for accessibility, ease of use, and effectiveness. It's really a beast. There is also an aluminum version of this. So if you don't like the aesthetics, there's a really nice white aluminum version of that Kubrick-esque design, which I really like. So go and check it out on the BASTL site. It's cheap, it's great, and it's really underrated. So be the smart one. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, bye bye.